Hey guys, welcome back. As I record this, we are within 2 weeks of our soft opening, and it's right about the latest point in time to do many of the things I've been doing this last week. And that was intentional on my part because it's a soft opening and not the grand opening, so I've got a little bit of room there to breathe. However, this is about the latest in the game that you can start buying your inventory, and particularly through a platform like iPage, which is Ingram's ordering site for bookstores and bookshops here in North America. So Ingram is a large distribution company that also does print on demand for independent publishers, but they're the main supplier for bookstores. Bookstores can buy their inventory from Ingram. They can buy it directly from publishers. They can buy it through independent sources like indie publishers, indie writers. There's all these different ways you can buy books. And the general rule of thumb is to have that done within 2 to 3 weeks of your store needing those assets, needing those books. And I won't get into the details of using iPage or what you experience in iPage. I will just say, though, that their catalog is vastly more extensive than most. And because of that, you have everything from readily available books that are sitting on a shelf in Tennessee or Pennsylvania or wherever your particular Ingram distribution point is. So when I built out my list by genre, I built a children's list, a romance list, a horror list, sci-fi, fantasy, literary fiction. I built all these independent or individual lists in iPage, and I curated much of those lists, but some genres I'm just not as familiar with, so I went and talked to people that are, right? So like my wife and my daughter, they're big romance readers. My daughter's a big YA reader. And I said, hey, give me a list of authors and books and series that you absolutely love. So I built lists based off of their recommendations in iPage. And then I double, triple check those lists, make sure that the books are in stock. They're not all on back order, which would be problematic if you have deadlines. Make sure that I have a mix of new releases and older releases, a mix of paperbacks and hardcovers for the newer releases, because a lot of new releases that are commercially available are not in paperback yet. You just want a good mix there to make sure that you're carrying a good variation of titles, not just by subgenre, but also by age. And then I adjust the quantities, right? So do I want 1 book, 2 books, 3 books, 10 books of each of those titles? And my general rule of thumb is between 3 and 5, but because I'm trying to curb the initial investment just a little bit, I pretty much ordered 3 of every book in the entire inventory. And I have many other multiples of books in the horror section because I'm using those for certain horror events like Horror Reader Weekend up in the Hudson Valley in New York in November. So I have a little bit more opportunity to sell those books outside of the brick and mortar location here. So you build all those lists, and then I paid for all of those books, right? So now I placed all those orders, Ingram is processing them, and I learned a very valuable lesson. My business bank account, which is Awesome Bank, by the way, Chesapeake Bank here in Hampton Roads, Virginia. They're a local bank. They're, kind of like the local-ish bank. And they are incredible with customer service. But there was a $5,000 a day limit, purchasing limit on my account that I should have known existed, but I just hadn't hit it and hadn't really thought about it. And when I placed my order last night, I got a message from Ingram today saying, hey, we were unable to process this one order because it far exceeded that amount. So I called my bank this morning and said, hey, I think I have a ceiling or a cap on my daily spending. Can you raise that? And they did. Now, if your bank, if you're getting ready to place an order, a significant order, many thousands of dollars order, you're going to want to see if the account that you're charging those books to has a ceiling like that, especially if you're on a time crunch. Because if I was delayed several days in receiving those books because I had to clarify an issue with the bank, that could be problematic. Luckily for me, Chesapeake Bank is very responsive, and they were like, yeah, we'll just raise your daily limit for you, and then what do you want your daily limit to be moving forward, because you can make a permanent adjustment to that. And so it was awesome. I got on the phone with them right in opening. They were super helpful, and within 2 hours, I had significantly raised my spending limit for the day, and then reached back out to Ingram and said, please reprocess the order. So just a little lesson learned there for book buying. And now I'm here at the shop and I'm working on outlets, installing power outlets above the bookshelves, because what we wanted to highlight on our bookcases is light. We want to use a lot of light and a lot of lit items, right? Seasonal things to make the shop more fun, make it more colorful, make it a little bit more of a destination place. So I'm making sure that we have a sufficient number of outlets on top of each of the main bookcases. Now, the cool part about this for us is that power was already run to the upper sections of the walls and is just above the bookshelves because of the previous occupant of this space. They had display cases all the way around. So we're not having to run new wire and cable and all this stuff to make this work. All we had to do was install the bookcases right up basically almost to where those cable runs were already coming out of the walls. And when we disconnected the old display cabinets, we were able to preserve those locations. And now we'll put the outlets in above the bookcases and make sure that they're all installed to code. So the bookcases are up. I've got a couple of small things I have to fix on one bookcase where we ran short of a front upper trim piece. Pops was kind enough to cut that for me. I have primed it. It is drying. And once I can put some paint on it, I will. And then tomorrow I will install that piece and then start making my rounds on the bookcases with puttying up all the nail holes and letting that cure, and then a touch-up paint coat after that. Let's see, what else do we have going on? I'm getting ready to paint walls. So I would have loved to have painted the walls before I had the bookcases installed, and no, I wouldn't have painted the entire wall behind the bookcase because that would have been wasteful. But I am in a good position now to paint the walls around above the bookcases. And so that is my next major project. Bookcases are built and installed and affixed to the bulkheads or the walls. The power issues are almost done being resolved. And now it's time to paint the space. Now, I am a picky person when it comes to paint lines, and I don't have the steadiest of hands or the best set of eyes, so I will use painter's tape. It will take me just as much time to tape off the entire overhead, paint the ceiling frame off for the false overhead so that I don't get paint on those pieces and around the bookcases, and then I can start painting. My general rule of thumb is 2 coats of paint on the wall before I even consider being done or even close to done with that job. So it'll take me 2 days to get the paint wrapped up here. 1 day to do 1 coat and then probably the next day to do the second coat. Unless I luck out and get super fast first coat down, then I can just run right behind it. Now there is a recoat time on paint. And again, don't want to get super technical here or even technical at all, but you have to make sure that based on the type of paint you use, you adhere to the recoat times on those paints. So what else has changed? We've been looking for all of our sideline furniture. We're looking for tables that'll fit in the middle of the space, buying the racks to display our t-shirts, all the tiny things, compared to building bookshelves, things that will catch up to you very quickly. They are a little bit more forgiving. We've already ordered all of our t-shirts, all of our tote bags, all of our stickers, those types of sidelines, but now we're looking for more bookish sidelines that we're not necessarily having to design. And I'll probably go through Fair at first to get some of that stuff. We've gone to Amazon for some of it, but honestly, Fair and Vistaprint have been the 2 places I've been going to. I am absolutely sure there are a million other options out there. We use some Etsy orders, for example, a little bit on eBay. So you can get creative and work within the budget that you have. But again, we're looking at this as like an initial soft launch and then continuing to build between the soft launch and the grand opening. At least that's theoretically how it's working in my head right now. And so I feel like we started ordering 2 weeks ago and realistically we started ordering a month ago, 2 months ago. And we didn't really get serious about ordering sidelines and primary inventory until within the last 2 weeks. But we've got at least a month ahead of us of that. Not only do I have to prepare for reimbursing my stock after we initially open, but I want new sidelines. I want new items coming into the shop, not just repurchasing the same items that we've just sold. So we're constantly stacking our carts with those items to bring a little bit more to the bookshop. And sidelines can be the difference between being profitable and not being profitable, to be I absolutely frank with you. As a bookseller, I would love it if the books did all the work for our business and we could just sustain the business solely on books. And you can. However, items outside of the books that are bookish things drastically increase your probability of being profitable in a very short period of time because people love merchandise. They love sidelines. It goes well. It's complementary to the books. And let's be honest, we're in the holiday season here. A lot of people want to gift these books, gift these items, and they're going to want to include some of those items with the book purchases. So that's where we're at right now. Okay. The last thing I want to bring up is something that I have a temporary mental solution for, but not a permanent solution. And that is my register / checkout / point of sale counter. We have the permanent design in place in here and on paper and in design. We're doing some work on the old display shelves that we took down to make a U-shaped checkout counter. But the front main part of the checkout counter is something that we're building. And so when I say we, it's probably going to be me for this first week, and I might build a temporary checkout counter to hold us over until we get Pops back from his work trip and I can get a real master carpenter type on the job to make this fancier than my limited technical skills can provide. So that's where we're at right now, and I hope you guys enjoy some of the footage of what we're doing in the shop. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. This is just the beginning for us of these playlists, these documentaries, or vlogs, whatever you want to call them. These are just the start of the series documenting our lives as an independent bookseller here in Williamsburg, Virginia. So here's a quick view of the space when we first visited to sign the lease. And you can see that there used to be signs on the wall, pictures hanging, and all of these display cases all around the room. We're going to have to take care of that. So the first step to removing these display cases was to unwire the electrical outlets that they installed in the top of each case, which is what Pops is doing here. Once the outlets are removed from the bookcases, we could literally just lift them straight off of these wooden cleats that were screwed into the wall. Once we remove all these screws, the cleats come right off the wall, throw the spare cleats in a pile, and start looking at patching drywall. Now, obviously, we're jumping forward in time to when the bookcases are installed here. And you can see that we've already patched all the walls with plaster and prepped everything for paint. So that means I sanded down all the areas that we had to patch. And yeah, we're just, we've got the whole space ready now for the first application of our fancy green paint. Now I'm showing you the full space because I want you to see how much painter's tape I had to install around the windows and all the bookcases. I'm a stickler for using painter's tape, and later in the video you'll see why that is, but it's time for more paint torture. We're going to mix this this wall paint here, and it is a different type of paint than what we used on our bookcases. This paint is specifically designed for high traffic areas, retail spaces. This is great. And it's scuff proof or scuff resistant paint that ends up looking fantastic in the end. It's just a beast to mix. This stuff took forever to get right. And now I've start this laborious process of cutting in the room, which means painting around all the door frames, the kick plates, the water fountains, the ceiling, every corner, and then taking that out into the main room and doing the same thing there around the kick plates, the bookcases, the ceilings, and the corners. And basically just work all the way around the room. Once you complete one pass, start the second one, and after 2 full passes of cutting in, we're ready to start rolling paint. So yeah, this first coat is coming along real nicely. I stopped mid-coat to move the ladder and adjust my approach on a couple of these areas where I want to use the roller versus the brush and vice versa. So yeah, looking good, man. I've got to do some cutting in around some speakers that I forgot to do before I started this first coat. So I'm going to stop and do some cutting in, and I like to get all my cutting in done before I get to the second coat for sure. But of course, nothing's that easy. Of course, when I get up the ladder to start cutting in, I noticed that there were areas of the wall beneath the speaker that I had plastered and repaired from the previous tenant hanging things, and it didn't look smooth enough. So I decided to sand the walls a bit more before I painted. All right, with all that cutting in done, now I can go ahead and roll out the rest of the walls. Um, Again, not trying to give a clinic here on painting, but I just think it's good for you to see that I used an extension rod here so that I didn't have to keep climbing up and down a ladder all day. It may seem like a minor detail, but if you've ever painted a large space and a tall space, the ceilings here are up to 12 feet, then you know that up and down the ladder all day is one, a waste of time, two, a lot of unnecessary work. And at the end of the day, you feel it. So um, I used an extension rod here and a typical commercial roller and rocked out, man. Just got the space all painted out. And I ended up making 2 full passes of the space. Not going to make you watch a second pass, but yeah, you can see that this paint goes on pretty well, pretty evenly the first coat. In fact, it went on so well the first coat, I deliberated whether I was going to even put a second coat up because the stuff had such great coverage um, with a single coat. So yeah, that's it, man. This is the rest of my life basically until the paint is done. And so fortunately for me, that was just a 1 to 2 day deal. And of course, the guys who are installing the exterior sign are finally done, and it looks amazing. And this is one of the biggest milestones of the entire week. So one of the last things we have to do with the bookcases now is fill all of the screw holes that are in the side pieces that we used to secure the shelves. Now they make these little wood plugs that you can use. You can put wood glue on them, hammer the plug into the hole, and then cut the plug flush with the Japanese saw. But those plugs can get expensive if you have as many as we do. So we just bought some dowel, lengths of dowel that will cut to plug length, and then we'll do the same process with that. And that just saved us a bunch of money. All right, so here we have the last bit of filler going onto the faces of the bookshelves. And I just take some wood filler and go over each nail hole on every face all the way around all 12 of the bookcases and fill in those holes and let that cure before sanding it flush and wiping it and then applying your final coat of paint. And that's it.